I want you to speak to us about this data. The reason I'm asking is because if you go on the street, the average person will still complain about prices being high and all of that. Yes, agreed. Some would say yes for food crops that are currently in season. Yes, a slight decrease. But they would also say for example, you say you're buying beans at the moment, say for 1,008 as compared to maybe 2,000 in December. But it was never 1,008 as at some months in 2024. I mean, beans was like 450, 500. So I mean, there's a huge difference. So how does this really, shape this conversation, and then does it really match with the resolutions that are reached? I mean, looking at the reality on ground. And then speak to us about, because she's also talked about the rebased consumer price index, being a factor to all of this. Did that really reflect Nigeria's consumption patterns?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I read the communique that came out after that meeting, and in it, the members made reference to the December inflation figure and November inflation figure. They compared the two, and they talked about month-on-month deceleration. Whereas we had a slight increase in inflation rate between November and December of last year, month-on-month there was a deceleration. Okay, now they didn't compare January and December for obvious reasons, because the two were computed based on different bases. Okay, now you are talking about data. The one that just came out based on the rebased CPI, the 24.48%. Okay, of course, year on year. What it simply means, it doesn't say that inflation rate has come down. That's not what it says. It simply means that prices are coming down. It simply says that prices are rising, but at a slower pace. So when you find the inflation rate, for example, drop from, say, 25 to 24, that doesn't mean that you have deflation. That's the technical term. It simply means that, yes, prices have, rose or have risen, or prices rose, but at a slower pace. Now, if you look at what the MBS did, which the MPC, concurred, they said, and as far as they were concerned, that reflected reality. If you look at what they did, I also mentioned it, I think, much earlier. I said what they did was to update the price reference period and the weight reference period. All along, they were using 2009 as base year. Now, you will agree with me that consumption patterns have changed since then. So it made sense to now bring that base year as close as possible to the current year. And that's why they used 2024 as the price reference period. Okay. Now, if you look at the classifications, food is still where the pressure point is. Okay, but food now constitutes 40% of consumption. So what that means is that if you take the average household, based on the study they conducted, the average household spends 40% of his spends 40% of his total consumption on food. Okay. You also find that the same food is showing up in restaurants. Restaurants increase from 1.2 to 12%. So if you add restaurants, what is spent, by way of meals away from home, if you add that 12 to 40, you still get 52% in terms of what is consumed. Okay. Now, in that classification, transport is also very high, and you will agree with me that transport costs, over time, has also increased. So that classification reflects, reality, unlike what we had in the past. So if you look at that classification now, you find food, the biggest weight. You have food, you have transport. Okay, you have the restaurant at 12, you have transport at 10.7. Okay, and of course you also have even health and education. They have also increased. People now spend more money on health and education. Recently, I read about just 3 days ago, the inflation number for UK came out. Inflation number in the UK was 2.5% in December. By January, it has gone up to 3%. Meanwhile, the expectation was that it was going to be 2.8%. And to what was it? What was the reason? It was attributed again to food, energy, and also the withdrawal of the exemption on VAT for private, private education, private school fees. So over time, consumption patterns change. So that is what the MBS has reflected, and that's also what the MPC took into cognizance when they also decided to hold. So I think largely data is what should drive the decisions that MPC takes. And I want to commend this idea of the Monetary Policy Forum. You can't overemphasize the need for fiscal and monetary policies to work in tandem, because the central bank cannot fight inflation alone. And do you know why? Because the factors driving inflation in Nigeria are not entirely monetary factors. This data now by the National Bureau of Statistics has made it obvious that the fiscal side also has a role to play. And that's why I want to ask them to keep up this idea of monetary policy forum, and in future meetings also consider inviting also the subnationals, maybe finance commissioners. They should be part of that monetary policy forum, because a lot of pressure too comes from the states, from the subnationals. Okay, particularly now that what they share by way of FAC has increased. So most of the time you find the central bank battling with fiscal surprises from the subnationals, especially when it comes to the the forex market. Okay, so that is something commendable, and I want them to keep it up. The idea of fiscal monetary policy collaboration, you can't overemphasize it, because as far as inflation is concerned, the two must work together, because there are factors that the government too must deal with.